Last time we stopped at Geshe Chikawa, right? And Geshe Chikawa had said, rely continuously on a happy mind alone. Whatever you may encounter, suffering, obstacles, adversities, slanders, sickness, whatever it may be, do not disturb your own joyful mind. It is difficult. But I think if we can be open, if we can have an open mind, which is really important, then it can be done. Also, I hope our classes that focus on practice as well as the ones focus on study and contemplation, I really hope the Dharma teachers could give teachings to your disciples in such a way, and also the Dharma teachers should uphold such kind of mindset in such a way the students would learn from the teacher according to the sutras. The teacher is like a mold, and then the disciples are like the copies of the teacher. If the teachers are like so, then the students would accustom to be like so as well. For example, in middle school or in the elementary school, from our observation, we can see that if the teacher is very much into dressing up and makeup and so on and so forth, the students would also learn from that behavior. If the teacher is more jealous of the others, then the students would also learn to be more competitive. If the teacher at times of giving teachings, their heads would tilt a bit, and it seems that the students would also sit tilted. I do have such kind of feeling. In terms of hygiene, we can also see that some of the khenpos and khenmos, if they're very clean and tidy, then we can see that the students of that khenpo and khenmo are very tidy as well. And if the teacher is not like so, then the students are not like that. If the teacher likes to eat snacks, and then the students would learn from that would keep that behavior as well. For that reason, I really hope all of our Dharma teachers here, you should try to maintain a joyful mind. And I'm not saying that you should pretend to smile. It is rather to keep an open-minded mentality and attitude. Whatever comes, you would be able to accept it. And if you can have such kind of open mindset, then your students would also be so. This is quite important. I really think that the head teachers are really crucial. When it comes to tidiness, I really hope that you can tidy up. I heard some of the homes of our fellow Sangha members are really tidy and clean. And in the near future, I really hope to maybe have another tour and make some observation. The other day, a khenpo told me that majority of you keep really good environment for yourself. Only very few lamas and jomos, they need to keep up a clean environment. Not sure if it's true. But I would like to address this to make sure that you pay attention to your personal hygiene as well as the clean and tidiness of your living environment. The khenpos and khenmos, I hope you can take a look. Maybe go to 10 of your students' home and make the observation rather than simply asking about it. But of course, you have to do it without their preparation. Now, this is the first aspect. And then the second, then he said that when you suffer, carry along everyone's suffering. So we need to shoulder all the sufferings of the sentient beings. Not only we need to transform suffering onto the path of practice, we need to transform happiness. Sometimes to transform happiness onto the path is more difficult. This time, studying it really makes me quite joyful. I'm not sure if you have gained anything from this teaching. Maybe you did, because every one of us would definitely encounter suffering, and if you know how to transform the suffering onto the path of practice, then your suffering would have the opportunity to end. The teaching whereby one brings happiness and suffering onto the path can thereby also be understood. In that way, if you understand how to bring suffering onto the path, then this is the grand finale of suffering. Thus, accordingly, making all faults arise as a good quality, then suffering will arise as bliss, and then you will be unharmed by any kind of obstructions or obstacles. This is why all the sacred forefathers, all the great masters said that happiness and suffering are false. They depend on knowing or not knowing how to change your mind. Now, all the happiness and suffering are false. That is why the great masters would say that we should not grasp onto happiness nor suffering. We need to learn how to transform our mind. But of course, speaking of it is easy. You have to learn to practice it. Otherwise, it is simply as otherwise you're simply as a rock that's been immersed in the water, but the rock will not get moist at all. So if we were to only practice just a little bit, even just a little bit in your life, if you can put these kinds of teachings into action, then you would benefit from these teachings. We must think that the suffering is the spiritual teacher who points out the shortcomings of cyclic existence, and that it is the actual cause of patience and compassion. Lots of practitioners would say that, well, I'm a Mahayati practitioner, I studied Madhyamika, everything is like a dream, like an illusion, but it is really the time to investigate whether you practiced well at the times when you're suffering, when others were to slander you, to insult you, to harm you, to hurt you, then that is the time to see whether you have come to some kind of realization of emptiness. There are people who would say that, well, come to the realization of Mahayati, and everything is devoid of the four extremes, and when at times people would knock on their doors, they would get completely terrified. And moreover, it is that which puts the Dharma practitioner to test and is a purifier of obscurations. Such ways of regarding suffering as an ornament abound in the biographies of all the past saints, all the past great masters. Furthermore, from Gyaltsen Tokme himself, the sign of an excellent Dharma practitioner is that a circumstance of suffering has become an aid for his virtuous practices. From the teaching of a great Longri Tangpa, he said that because yesterday I felt really bad, my virtuous practice increased. Nowadays, people would say that, well, if I were to have insomnia, if I were to encounter any kinds of little suffering, then those kinds of little things would cause more insomnia, more anger, more aggression, and more competitiveness. Afflictions would increase and increase further. I think it's very much related to our mindset and our characteristics. Before we fall asleep, it's the best for us not to hear some bad news. Otherwise, our mind would get disturbed, or some videos and whatever kinds of audios that you would hear. It is better for you not to listen to those disturbing sounds before you go to sleep, especially if you don't have a good heart. or if you have some heart problems. Look at Larry Tampa. Larry Tampa said that because yesterday I felt really bad, my virtuous practice increased. Yesterday I had a little nerve wrack, quite a bit anxious, and then I listened to some news and slowly got sleepy and finally fall asleep, because if I don't sleep well, then I would not be energetic on the second day. So whenever we look at ourselves, we indeed would admire the insights and the experience of Larry Tampa. Moreover, from the teachings of Dharma Lord Gotama, from Gotama, he said that a Dharma practitioner is clearly distinguished in the face of negative circumstances. As practitioners, we can see that there are people who can be very steady and very reliable, but there are people at times of encountering suffering, then all of their weakness will be exposed. And then he continued to say that I was myself inflicted with a great number of fleas. I accepted them for long and took them as my path. Now I am no longer harmed by any sufferings. Look at Gotama. He has about 2 kilograms of fleas on his body. Well, that is according to the original Tibetan text. And nowadays there are practitioners who tell me that they found 2 fleas on their body. It is horrifying. They couldn't fall asleep. But look at him. He has he has a whole kilogram of fleas, and he can transform that onto the path. There was also the Bodhisattva Sangha. He let a beggar who's covered in fleas to sleep on his cushion, because he bestowed great pity and compassion upon that beggar. Look at Gotama. In order to not harm the sentient beings, he would let the fleas sit there on his body. The teachings of Gotama is indeed really wonderful, and I really enjoy his teaching. So whenever I have opportunity, I would try my best to translate more of that. He's a great practitioner. And then it is said that, moreover, through the circumstance of illness, the great Bodhisattva himself gained control over his dreams and increased the activities of virtue. At times of illness, sometimes we do not respect the teacher, the doctors or the nurses because of our illness, but look at the great masters. They would transform illness onto the path and increase their virtue.
Sunundui tamchi zubanya tomna nibe jana panshe jirgana jiranong chuba chubam solen roa